Welcome back to our election coverage right here on KTN News. Of course, this is Kivumbi 2017. Welcome back to the program. And let me go straight to the studio discussion tonight and introduce our guest in studio. We have lawyer Mudomi Thiankolo. We also have Demas Kiprono, who is a senior legal officer, Article 19, as well as Mule Musau, national coordinator, local election observers group, ELOG. Good evening, gentlemen, and welcome to the program.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So, Wakili, let me begin with you. We've seen a lot of development today, both inside the courts, on the streets, as well as the anniversary towers. And let me begin with the anniversary towers. That is where the IEBC is based. So, you've seen the appointment there by the IEBC chair, who was appointed. Somebody is going to be his deputy returning officer. And NASA have been saying that this is illegal. Jubilee is saying this is an excuse by NASA, trying to create some sort of conspiracy. So can you clear the air? How legal or illegal was that move by the IBC chair?
Yes, Yusuf, if I may have a take on it, that appointment is unconstitutional if you check the legal provisions on which it is based. There is none of them that justifies or creates any room as a matter of law for the appointment in question. Number two, our constitution and the law does not actually envision the position of a deputy national returning officer. So the long and short of it,
it's an illegal move.
It's illegal, it's unconstitutional.
Now, Demas, what do you read in this? Does it mean that the chair has delegated his duties can delegate his duties to the deputy? And they're also saying that this is a move, meant to show some sort of dissatisfaction with the chair? As much as he made that appointment himself.
There's a legal maxim that a person who delegates a person who's delegated cannot delegate. The person who's delegated to be the national returning officer for the presidential poll is the chair, and so he cannot go out again and delegate the same. And this perhaps just is another example of perhaps the failure to understand the law on the part of the commission, and perhaps by extension the chair, who's the lawyer in the commission. Because ever since they took office, most of their decisions, if taken to the test at the courts, you find that they're invalidated. So I agree with Wakili here that that appointment is absolutely legal, and perhaps unless he envisions his absence also, but that's something I would ask myself. Does he think he's not going to be around during that election? I would not know.
Now, Mula, this is where I want to bring into this conversation. We've seen an avalanche of petitions at the court. There's one that has been filed at the Supreme Court. The hearing is expected to take place tomorrow. There's a petition that seeks to stop the election altogether. As somebody who's involved with, the observer mission in the country, what is your stand, basically?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, elections are premised on the law. And if they're premised on the law, then there must be interpretation of the law, which must be sought every step of the way. And my take on this is that when you see so many litigations on the process, it's a very clear pointer to the fact that there's uncertainty on quite a number of issues.
Yes.
I've said on a number of times that elections need to be very clear, they need to be very predictable, the process should be very clear for everybody. So when you see people running to court, when you see people seeking interpretation at every junction, it's a very clear manifestation of uncertainty and therefore a need for further unfurling of the process.
And Mula, there are so many Kenyans who have been very critical about, these observer missions in the country, especially the foreign observer missions. They're saying they didn't do their homework properly. So at the moment, have you people deployed your agents all across the country? And what is the message to Kenyans, basically? Are you expected to do it right this time around?
Well, I don't know what you mean by saying we need to do it right. I think we've been doing it the way we understand it to be done. International observers come for a short stint of time. They come with tools, checklists, which allow them to be able to check part of the process. Some of them come equipped with tools which allow them to be able to speak to a longer part of the process, and they speak, and their script is limited to that particular tool. So they cannot be able to go beyond that. I think one of the emerging issues after the nullification of the last election was that the question was whether the tools that observers were using were wide enough to have been able to take account of a process like the transmission process, which is a very technical process. So, and I think quite a number of missions admitted to the fact that they had not enough tools to be able to speak to that entire process. From a domestic election observation point of view, I recruit villagers, I recruit the ordinary mwananchi in the villages to observe the elections at their polling stations. I'll train them in terms of understanding the process and therefore giving me data that allows me to be able to analyze on that particular process.
We'll shortly talk about that result ELOG released during that Bangle election on August 8th. We'll talk about that shortly. But Wakili, I'd like to hear your view on this. You know, there are those who are saying that the sheer number of petitions, the cases we're seeing both in the High Court and the Supreme Court with regards to Kenya's election, shows a picture where, you know, IEBC is not well prepared, or either there's no right environment to conduct the presidential rerun. Do you agree with that?
There has been a problem, Yusuf, even as we talk about these petitions, you must see them in the context of countless other petitions. In the last 1 year, we've had almost 40 to 50 cases regarding this election. And the IEBC has lost most of them. The question that arises from that state of affairs is whether the IEBC is impervious to sound legal advice, or whether they receive good legal advice but ignore it, or whether there are people within the IEBC that are hell-bent on bungling the election. And for me, it's I think one of the discussions we must have when all this confusion is over is a national discussion that asks, how did such an important national body and a constitutional commission, how did it make so many fundamental missteps as a matter of law, especially when its head is a senior lawyer, its CEO is a senior lawyer, it is an entire legal department, and it's in the public domain that this body is actually advised by very eminent and highly regarded external lawyers. For me, I think there is more than meets the eyes.
And there's some development here. I'd like to pose this question to Mole, who is, of course, representing ELOG here. And we're getting reports that the Commonwealth has withdrawn its election observers from Kenya, citing security concerns. Does that worry you?
Well, the first thing that an election mission will do is that there is a need to guarantee the safety of the observers. Remember, the people who are collecting this information are human beings. And for foreign missions, some of them come from outside the country. So when they characterize the situation in the country to be insecure, it is within their rights to be able to call off the mission.
But there are those who, Mule, with all due respect, there are those who have predicted this. For example, ELOG estimates, according to reports during the August presidential election that were bungled, were consistent with IEBC's official results for the 2017 presidential election. Now, according to ELOG then, Uhuru got 54% of the votes, while Raila Odinga got 49.9%. As compared to IEBC results of 54.3% for Uhuru and 44.7% for Raila. So where did you get it wrong?
Well, I think the question about the PVT, if you are talking about the PVT, it will take a very long discussion to be able to explain the parallel vote tabulation. I think what we said, then we talked about that PVT, but we also talked about the electoral process. ELOG has been in the process from March. And we've talked about the process about bungled party primary elections, issues about the campaigns, issues about use of incumbency, and there are quite a number of issues, the voter register itself. So we've talked about all this process, and when we talked about the PVT was just a projection on the results.
So were they right or wrong?
That does not speak to the process. And in regard to the process, the nullification, of course, of the Supreme Court in respect to the August 8th elections, we supported it because the end game here is, as Maraga said, the justice, it's a process. It's not about the results. It's not about just the party nominations. It's not just about the voter register. You look at the process in its entirety, and therefore, the call by the Supreme Court was actually the right call based on the information and the investigations that they had conducted.
Now, Dimas, I'll give you your time, Okele, but I'd like to hear Dimas' opinion on this. And those who are saying the way forward for this country, it's either these two leaders, the two main protagonists, have some sort of a dialogue, or we go the way the president has called for, that is the election. What do you think can be the solution for this country moving forward?
I think elections have become a means to an end and not a part of what we understand as our democracy. A country should have elections, should have participation of the people, human rights, and very importantly, the rule of law. As in, everyone should be equal in front of the law. But you find that in our processes, politics becomes paramount, and even human rights are read against the context of the right to vote. So you find that we concentrate so much on elections, yet we neglect that we have now thrown away 50 billion by the September 1st declaration, and right now we're about to go into a process that will cost 12 billion. What are the ramifications to our economy? If a company was being run the way we are running this country, in terms of our democracy, a time would come where we'd ask ourselves, who are these people we appointed to run these things? Where did we go wrong? So we find ourselves in a situation where a lot is dispensed in terms of resources, in terms of time. Many people are complaining that the economy is suffering right now. But I think all that amount of money that we have thrown away through a botched election is something that should be accounted for. Article 10 of the Constitution, Article 210 of the Constitution talks about prudence and accountability, prudence in spending of public resources. So we have lost the ball. Elections are supposed to decide who becomes our leader for 5 years. Then we leave all other ingredients that are very important.
Now, Wakili, I understand you wanted to react to Mule's comment earlier, but yes, even as you react to that, the main question that people are asking is, why conduct an election when a significant majority are not going to participate?
Definitely, it's a good question, but maybe if I may begin with the foreigners, one of the things our viewers must understand, contrary to the common assumption on the streets of our country, it is not the case that when foreigners come here, they come as independent and purely neutral observers. You must see their role and the positions they take in the context of global politics and international economic relations, and you must see them in the context of where they're coming from.
So are you saying the observer missions are not independent?
I'm saying that it is not every position they take. You see, there's a tendency in this country to assume that because foreigners have taken a particular position, that position is the correct position or it is in the best interest of Kenya. The truth is that all politics is about interest, and when you see those foreigners here, their major concern is not about the average Kenyan citizen. It's not about the interest of Kenya. It is their interest, and the world is so interconnected, it's not very hard to see, if you look very keenly at any one formation of the foreign observers, which commercial or economic interest they represent in our economy. So what I'm saying is that the idea that because foreign missions of this or other origin has taken a certain position, it is right or it is wrong, we need to have perhaps a better understanding of how the global world works.
And you've talked about the foreign observer missions. What is your view towards, the local observer groups?
I would expect the local observer group to be comprised of the citizens of Kenya. I would expect them to have a better grasp of the issues on the ground. And I would expect them to be much more patriotic than a guy who has no citizenship in this country and his only interest is perhaps to win certain classes of tenders, to protect certain foreign investments. And if you check the structure of our economy, you find that actually most of the juiciest parts of our economy are owned by foreigners. And that's the context in which you must see some of those foreign positions.
I'm sure Mule will want to react to this. Do you agree with Wakili here that there's some observer missions, especially foreign ones, who are serving certain interests?
Well, my take is that when the EU comes to observe, they have tools, and this is my observer's point of view, that they have tools that they come and use in terms of collecting the information. When whatever verdict or whatever outcomes they give out, they should be interrogated on the basis of that tool that they are using. They have objectives of coming to observe this. Part of course, of this is that we are part of an international community where we are brothers and sisters who can be able to watch over each other. But I think it is important that when we are interrogating in any information coming from the observer missions, we need also interrogating the basis of the framework under which they are operating. So if they are saying that they have a tool which allows them to be able to go to the polling stations, how many were they, what did they observe, and what is their verdict as far as from that observation. If we keep it to that, then you don't get biased. As far as just a quick comment on the local observers that Mudomi has talked about, is that it's true that, of course, we draw our observation, like I was saying earlier, from people in the ground. These are Kenyans. They have everything to lose or gain from a good or bad election. We expect them to be apprehensive about the kind of outcomes which come through from a bad process. And therefore, they'll be much more keener in giving or getting information that allows there to be progress, which allows them to be able to speak objectively to a process that only builds in terms of the electoral processes that we have in our country.
Now, I've read to you some of the results ALOG had right after the August 8th election earlier. And this time round, does ALOG have some projections, bearing in mind that one of the lead candidates has withdrawn from the contest?
Like I said, discussing the PVT is a very long process. But just for purposes of answering the question, we do not intend to do the PVT in terms of the projection of results. But we intend, and this is, of course, is dependent, and I must first hasten to say that laws are the ones which are going to dictate whether we're going to have an election or not. At the point where we are still not very sure whether we're having an election on the 26th. Should that happen, that we have an election on the 26th, then as citizen election observers, we are expected to document whatever process will happen. We understand there's a boycott. We understand there may be violence. We understand that there may be parts of the country which may vote. One would want to get a documentation of that process, whether it is a flawed process, whether it is a good process, but at least some information needs to come from this for purposes of posterity. Because we shall also be discussed at some point reformation of our electoral processes. And it will be important for us to be able to have information that is drawn from a process which was able to observe what exactly happened in that particular event.
Well, I think that will serve as a final comment. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Wakili and Dimas, you have 30 seconds each. Your final comment moving forward. Of course, we've seen the report there from the East African community. They're worried about what is happening in Kenya. There's tension in the country already. So moving forward, what do you think needs to be done to make sure that everyone remains peaceful?
For me, there is no point in holding an election whose referee has already told the country and the world that he cannot guarantee it will meet the constitutional threshold. Doing this election would smack of some of the farcical things we do. We are the only country where we hold even national exams that are in the internet, but nonetheless we proceed to conduct them on the following day. And I think conducting this election would be analogous to some of the jokes we have seen when the national exams have leaked and people are pretending nonetheless to be administering an exam.
I think you've delivered your point. Dimas, you have 30 seconds.
Well, I think, it is time for the best interest for this country to be served by our leaders should stand up because we're being dragged into very muddy waters. And we keep quoting the law, challenging the law, but we seem to be steadily going into uncertain waters, and perhaps we need some maturity among our political class.
Well said. Thank you very much, Demas Kiprono. Demas is a Senior Legal Officer, Article 19. Mule Musau, National Coordinator, Local Election Observers, ILOG, and Mudomi Thiankolo is a lawyer. Thank you, gentlemen, for your input. Now, over to our images of the day, and it's time for Survivor Laughs, an Ivorian soldier lifting the makeshift raft built with branches by his comrades and himself. The detachment, the intervention, okay, that is a French force in Ivory Coast. Anyway, let's have a look at what they're doing there.
Allez, c'est bon. Viens. Viens. Allez. Allez, faites descendre. Allez. Allez. Allez, et suivant. Suivant.
Sur le PRPV 39, pas à rapprocher le microphone de la bouche pour bien que vous soyez entendu. Les deux, il n'y aura pas de conversation téléphonique, on fera juste à la fin, une fois que tout le monde aura compris comment utiliser.
Il y a des liens, il y a tout le temps dessus, donc attention.
And finally, it's time we look at our Twitter poll tonight. And we did ask you earlier, will you cast your ballot during the repeat presidential election on October 26th? And 34% of you said yes, 66% of you said no. Janet Mashuka says, no, I wouldn't vote for people who never underwent any pain to get to the top. Only the common Mwananchi understands the pain of a struggle. And then Atulutomia says, I will not vote because even Chebukati himself does not trust the electoral body. And Gidhua Okoine says, yes, I shall cast my vote on 26th. He's tweeting from Bahati, Nairobi. And Paul Kimathi says the 64% is indicative of what Raila Odinga will get in a free and fair poll. And one final one. Atsa Brown says, because the polls won't be credible. And of course, the feedback there still coming in from our Twitter poll there, where 66% of you said they're not going to vote and 34% of you said yes, they're going to exercise their democratic right come Thursday. Well, and that brings us to the end of our program tonight. This has been Kivumbi 2017. We'll continue giving you back-to-back coverage of what is turning out to be the longest, the most litigated election in Kenya's history right here on KTN News. Many thanks for watching. My name is Yusuf Ibrahim. Enjoy the rest of the night.